Hey, Warrior Saints! Welcome to our Crucifixional live stream. Father Chris here. Glad to have you beautiful people with us on this glorious Tuesday, the 15th of February. I am busted because yesterday was Valentine's Day, and I forgot to say happy day of love to all of you beautiful people. We love you. That being said, we're going to get right after it. We've been talking about Babel, what we did yesterday about this building of a city with a tower into the heavens that angered God so much. And the reason that it upset God, if you remember from Genesis chapter 11, was that he sees in his people an attempt to replace him, to move him aside and establish themselves, this people, as the progenitor, as the morality layer outer. God, I'm losing my words. But, to establish their own morality, to have the mind of what is, to design the way to live life. And as we recognize that leads to becoming in our own minds a reference where we decide what happens. Now, we decide what happens, but also what is good, what is moral, what is just, what is right, the way to live, the way to be. The problem is that as that trickles into our modern society, we explored yesterday this advertisement from one of our local casinos here in Arizona about you do you. And this is what that way, that Babel mindset proffers to us, is that as long as you do whatever makes you feel good, as long as you do whatever makes you happy, or as long as you do what your fleeting emotion at that moment feels is the right thing, that's what you should do. And that's how you should live your life. And ultimately, that will make you happy. Now, you and I who are watching, and those who hopefully we ask if you share this all over the place, let's really get people thinking about this. If we reflect on that, we might decide that if I do all the stuff all the time that makes me happy, I may not really actually be that happy, right? In fact, we can often see that it leads to a little bit of misery. And I think here's the problem. It's funny because it falls into, please allow me to pontificate for a minute, forgive me, but because it falls into a realm of morality, the church has something to say about that. I mean, morals and ethics should be guided and delivered to us from God, right? Like those values of love and compassion and nurturing and care for those in need, the poor, the orphans, the widows, that kind of, those are God things, right? Those are the morality has to have a source other than myself, right? Like it's just how it works. Otherwise, we find ourselves in the misery of what we're in, where we create our own morality. This morality has to have a reference, but the reference that God gives to us is challenging. It's not easy. And in fact, it doesn't tell you, you do you. It tells you the opposite. You do what's good for other, not for self. It's completely juxtaposed to this modern secular narrative of you do you. And the problem with that is that because the church teaches the gospel and says, like, here's the hard line in the sand, it ruffles people's feathers because it's hard work, and most people don't want to do all that hard work. They want it easy, they want it quick, they want it fast, they want just the slothful way right into it so I can do what I want to do. And the challenge with that is that we now see a proliferation of all these different types and codes of morality that go against what we know in our hearts and minds to be true, what we know from religion and tradition to be true, what we know in biology to be true. We find all of these things that are thrown at us, that are shoved down our throat as being moral, and yet the church is saying, well, wait a minute. No, they're not. They're kind of crazy. What are you doing? You're making a mess. That's why you guys are so miserable. And then here's the problem. People come and they say, when they're struggling through this, they say things like, well, gosh, the church is just so archaic and it's so outdated, and it's something written by men, white men 2,000 years ago. And why do we have to listen to that kind of stuff? And all those things that we hear. And here's how it should be. That's what they tell us. This is how you should act. This is how you should behave. This is how you should think. This is morality. And then all of a sudden I listen to this stuff and I'm thinking, here is the secular narrative trying to do Christianity better than the church. What? That's what they're saying. We, the secular narrative, do Christianity better than the church. We know better than the church. And I keep thinking to myself, are you insane? Are you nuts? Obviously I would say maybe you're a little bit insane. The idea is that the church stands there for a reason. It's there. The teachings of the gospel are not necessarily this oppressive, archaic mentality. People often say things to me like, Father, I wish that the church would do this or embrace that because then it would become more relevant. And I'm like, Ya Zalami, what are you talking about? The church has never been more relevant. It has to be that source, that deposit of faith that defends truth. And not just 2 + 2 mathematical equal 4 truth. God's truth. That's what I'm talking about. The way to live life. Remember, the Babel experience created a tower that led to scattering abroad and confusion. That's what it says in Genesis. God's way, it's harder, sacrificial. It's a commitment to a 40-year sojourn in the wilderness before you go into the promised land. And it's committed to dying on the cross before you enter the kingdom of heaven and the empty tomb. It's harder, but that's the only way that works. You get it? The point that I'm trying to make is that this secular narrative that we're all struggling so hard with, because we're confused by it, because we can see some good ideas and good thoughts, but then we're like, it doesn't work right. It's not speaking right. It's not talking the right language. It's going against biology and science and math and morals and ethics and the things that we know in our hearts to be true. So how do we navigate through all that kind of stuff? And that's the struggle that we have. I promise you this. If you try to replace the church's position, the church's teaching of what the Christian faith is supposed to be like, with a secular understanding of what the Christian faith is like, you're going to find misery after misery. It's hard. I get it, because the church is going to tell you things you don't necessarily want to hear. The gospel is going to correct you, but not because it's a mean, old, rotten, old man. It's because it is unto life. Anyways, I'll stop pontificating. They're giving me dirty looks. But that being said, you don't have to navigate this by yourselves. Visit us, warriorsaints.org. It's right there. Get it. Get on the way of the Warrior Saint with us. Look, I'll end here today. We're doing our best to navigate through all this chaos and find the right way to live our lives so that we might find that actual peace and that actual joy that we're so desperately thirsty for. Let God give it to you. The world's there. We got to live in it. It's got some great stuff. But the only way to live is the way of the Warrior Saint. Ultimately, God's way. Love you, beautiful people. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, keep walking on the way of the Warrior Saint.